Welcome to Yell, Fight, Sooie, college football from three friendly-ish rivals.
And welcome to Yell, Fight, Sooie. I'm your host, James Christopher. I'm the fight in this traveling band of sports experts. We've also got the Sooie down there, Scott McIntyre. Scott, how you doing this morning?
Pretty good, but there's not great news going on, so as good as can be.
Yeah, definitely gonna be a different tone of the episode we're used to having. And then of course we've got Andy Tom Cheston, the Yell from your Fighting Texas Aggies. Andy?
I don't even feel like yelling right now. There's a Poller over the world, I think, this week.
Yeah, and we'll jump right into it. Mike Leach passed away, and there's a lot to unpack with that. It was sudden. For as much as he held on for a few days, it seemed clear that it was imminent, that there was when you start calling family to start getting on planes. Let's talk a little bit though to start out, just from a football coaching perspective, and we'll start with Scott on this. I think people might underestimate just how different college football would look today if he had never coached. Like, pretty much every offense we run stems from them. How impactful has he been from a X's and O standpoint on college football?
From an X's and O standpoint, Mike Leach revolutionized things. He started out under Hal Mumme at Kentucky. Mike Leach has a quote to where he basically says, people that think a balanced offense is 50% run and 50% pass, well, that's just 50% stupid. And he's right, because as Mike showed, you can throw the ball 85% of the time, but if you throw high percentage passes in a short way, you can move the ball up and down the field. Mike Leach, what he did at Kentucky to start the revolution, to carry it over with Bob Stoops at Oklahoma during probably what was Oklahoma's last real glory run, and then carried that on to Texas Tech, put them on the map. Washington State won a school record 11 games under him and his offense. And then, of course, when he came to Mississippi State, people said that'll never work in the SEC. They say that a lot. It tends to always work in the SEC, just like it does everywhere else, too. Mike Leach, from a football standpoint, just football alone, let's take out everything else, just football alone, Mike Leach revolutionized the passing offense. And that can be seen, through his coaching tree. If you look at his coaching tree and who he's just, Josh Heupel and what Josh Heupel did at Tennessee this year. Well, Josh was a Mike Leach guy. Dave Aranda was a Mike Leach guy. I know Dave's a defensive coach, but he was still a Mike Leach guy. If you look at the tree of Mike Leach guys, you see a lot of
Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona, yeah. Right?
Yeah, I got the tree sitting here. You mentioned Dave Aranda, but Art Briles, Jeff Choate, Sonny Dykes, Greg McCaskin, Ruffin McNeil, Dana Holgerson, Seth Littrell, Lincoln Riley, who's the hottest property in college football right now in some circles, Ken Wilson, and then players under him: Kingsbury, Neil Brown, Josh Heupel, like you mentioned, Eric Morris, Sonny Cumbie. This is a who's who of football, really, in the Southwest and in the West. He touched lives and created programs out of nothing, because Texas Tech was in the wilderness before Mike Leach came.
I want to get to Texas Tech with you on that, Andy, because I remember when, much like they said, Scott, that it wouldn't work in the SEC, I remember people saying a passing-based offense in the winds of West Texas. What are they thinking? Andy, what was your first impression on his hire, and then just sort of his Big 12 ranks? I do want to get, obviously, the personality of Mike Leach is coming next, including just some of his favorite quotes and including his end at Tech. But whenever he was first hired and then you watched it develop, what were just some of your impressions as somebody who played him every year?
Well, the initial thing was I was glad he was not working at Oklahoma anymore, because between him and Bob Stoops, they were destroying Texas A&M and had shifted the power. The way the Big 12 got structured after a while, and more history than people probably want to know, is at least in the South, when they made those divisions, you could have two good teams. And that ended up always being Texas and Oklahoma. But before Oklahoma hired Bob Stoops, it was Texas and Texas A&M, to the point that Texas A&M made 2 consecutive conference finals, won the championship in '98, which unfortunately is our last conference championship of any sort, but that's not this episode. And then you're like, all right, cool. They're going to lose their offense because Leach is going elsewhere, and he's going to go someplace that he's not going to really affect anything out in Lubbock, because right, wrong, or indifferent, that is how a lot of the Big 12 viewed Texas Tech. It's a school out on the plains of West Texas that can't recruit because they're too far away from anybody. There's no local talent. And he's going to put in a passing offense, which with nobody, just Smurfs. And he made that team, regardless of their talent level initially, immediately competitive, because, you know, all of us enjoy baseball. We've talked Moneyball before. He saw a statistical inequity in the way football offenses were run. And he was able to basically take advantage of the defenses in the Big 12 at that point, which were very linebacker driven. And we're going to come beat the hell out of the quarterback and stop the run. Well, that's great, because we're going to throw 5-yard passes right behind those linebackers who are blitzing up the field. And they're going to get 5, 7, 10 yards every time I throw the ball. I don't need to run the ball until you back your safeties off. And once you back your safeties off, it's game on. And if that sounds common and it sounds like it's common sense, it's because that change between what Mummy was doing and what Leach was doing has affected college football and pro football since that point. And that's not even why most people love Mike Leach. So that, I mean, it's just I hated playing Texas Tech, hated going to Lubbock, but hated playing Texas Tech, because that was the question, because Mike Leach was going to find a way to make the game closer than it should be. And more times than not, he's going to figure out a way to beat you.
Well, he had a 9-4 record against you. So I mean, I can
wow, was it that one-sided? I didn't know that. Wow.
With immensely less talented teams.
And I really wanted to touch on that too, Andy, is that if you look at the list of coaches that Mike Leach developed, that's a laundry list. It's a great list, like what you just gave. But if you look at the number of quarterbacks that went on to NFL success out of his offenses, it's not that great. So it proves it is the system.
It's the system, right?
It's a good quarterback, but it's the system. And then when you get a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, who does get a guy like Pat Mahomes out there at Texas Tech that had a lot of talent, you see where Pat Mahomes is now. Leach, to say that Leach sprinkled the seeds of the passing revolution that we felt the last decade or two, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, and you know what?
To that point, he was Mike Leach was the winningest coach in Texas Tech history. Winning percentage 661, which is far and away above anybody else that coached. Spike Dykes, I guess, is next, and he was a 550 coach there, 500 coach in West Texas. And that's what we always expect out of Texas Tech. You're a 500 team. Some days some years you might win 7, some days you're going to lose 7, but that's where you are. He put that program on the map, and really they've stayed on the map, whether they've deserved it or not since then, because of Mike Leach's legacy.
Well, and I really do believe your comparison to Moneyball, Andy, was right on. It really is those exact same. Take the guys that don't go to Texas or A&M or OU and LSU and figure out a way to do something. Now, obviously,
to that point, Jim, he didn't play. Leach wasn't a player. Leach.
Well, yeah, and that's where we're going to next, Scott. Like, one of the things that I love about Leach, it's first of all, his personality is amazing. His press conferences were still, for me, like, every Monday I found him on YouTube just to see whatever wacky stuff he was going to say. And one of the things is, it felt like for the first time watching football that it was okay to be a smart guy in football and to be okay with being a smart guy in football, because clearly football coaches are smart, but we all saw Brian Kelly and LSU try to dumb it down a little bit, right? Andy, just again, we'll start with you this time and go back to Scott, but some of your favorite Leachisms, and what about that angle to it? Like Scott said, he didn't play college football. He was just smarter than everybody in the room.
Yeah, it's he was a lawyer. I believe he passed the bar. I don't think he ever practiced. And regardless of what you may think of lawyers, you generally have to be of some level of intelligence to pass the bar. He was a brilliant guy, and he was quirky. And I think one of the things that drew people to him, because there's no reason for me as an A&M fan to like him. As Scott mentioned, 9-4 against my teams. And it didn't matter what team. He beat us at Tech. He beat us at Mississippi State as recently as this year. But he's a guy that was incredibly likable, incredibly knowledgeable, and could literally talk about anything. And that's what made the press conferences so great. I know most of us who are college football fans probably spent a good chunk of this week watching things like the tournament he brought off the cuff of the Pac-12 mascots to determine who was the toughest. That was in response to a press conference answer. The fact that he hates candy corn, which makes me like him even more because candy corn's disgusting. The reason they don't advertise for candy corn is because they made it all at once in 1889, and they've just had the same stockpile going back and forth. But talking about that and how he likes gummy clusters. That was a whole press conference answer to how did your team do? My favorite rant of his was Mike Sherman took A&M into Lubbock and beat Mike Leach towards the end of Mike Leach's run there. And Mike Leach's press conference talked about all these guys and their fat little girlfriends distracted them from playing football. And if you go look up fat little girlfriends, I can't do it justice on YouTube. It is an incredible dismantling of his own team after a loss.
Scott, how about you? Just just your thoughts on his personality, on, like I said, him being okay with football can be for smart people too, as opposed to the meatheads, as Andy often describes baseball players.
My favorite Mike Leach quote still is when he called Craig James a douche. That's still my favorite.
Well, it's funny because we'll get back to Craig James a little later in the episode.
People may remember that Craig James' son played for Leach, and Leach disciplined him.
Yeah, we're going to get there in a minute.
And so, but for me, I like that because Arkansas, anybody who was in the Southwest Conference got ran over by the Pony Excess team because they were paying people like crazy. And Craig James was the holier than thou part of that team, who supposedly didn't know about any of it going on. And for 30 years later or 25 years later, whatever it was, for there to be a clap back from Mike Leach of all people to Craig James, that's still my favorite. I love how he talks about how he hates fruitcake. I'm glad it only comes around one time a year because people hate it. Candy corn's the same. Andy talked about that. Those are outstanding. The wedding advice.
That's my favorite one. The 15-minute
advice clip is amazing. And if you have, again, I tell people, if you have not seen or heard the wedding advice clip, go out to YouTube. There's a couple of them. There's a couple of occasions where he's given people wedding advice and just, hey, look, your best thing to do is, I don't know, whatever you want, dear. These are the words you need. I mean, I was telling this story to my son last night. I'd shared the videos of Mike Leach with Rachel within the past month, just to show her this is how entertaining this guy is. Oh, and by the way, he happens to be a football coach. Washington State's been playing football since 1894. Mike Leach won more football games there in a single season than any other coach before. So,
wow. See, I didn't even know that.
11-win season. They had never had it. So there's so much. When somebody has a personality and they don't have the talent to go along with it, that's cute. You can find that on social media every day, anywhere. When people have talent but they don't have the personality, Brian Kelly, you get to see that pretty often. Every Nick Saban, you see that often. But when you can get a guy with the personality and the talent to back it up, you get a gold mine treasure trove, and that's what Mike Leach has been. And I can only imagine how many stories the guy had that didn't make it out of the locker room. I just
to your point though, I always felt like reporters would almost like go in trying to see if they could be the one to trigger the weird answer.
It's really interesting. You said we brought up the name of Paul Feinbaum more than once on here, but Paul Feinbaum talked about the time where he was sitting down with Leach and he said, okay, coach, I want to conduct a serious interview with you. I don't want any, I just want to really touch. And so he started off by asking him about his disciples, right? About the other coaches. And Leach was all in on this. And Leach was very, being very serious, talking about the guys that have coached for him. And then he caught himself in a monitor. And he wasn't even wearing a tie, but he started adjusting his polo collar and making faces at the camera. And he was gone. And then everybody else that was talking on the dais about this was like, well, that was Leach. You could try to get it. He could be serious for a moment, but there was a character, there was a character that he played, and he was going to play that up, but it's best when you just let Mike Leach be Mike Leach.
See, and I don't even think it's a character. I think he generally was one of those people that didn't care about what you thought about him. He wanted to be who he wanted to be. It's been a few years since I read Swing Your Sword, which if you can find a copy of that book, I noticed on Amazon, it's hardbacks up to $100. You both were going to get a copy of it for Christmas, and then the price shot up 2 days ago. So yeah, maybe the Kindle version.
I'm fine with paperback.
But it's an incredible read, and that's just who Mike Leach was. I don't care what you think about me. I know that I'm intelligent. I know that I have my own worldview, and I want to share it. And you can come along for the ride or not, but I'm still going to be me, regardless of how you take the message. And he's a guy that I think genuinely had fun doing what is an incredibly stressful, hard, soul-crushing job at times.
Well, you also got the feeling too that he was interested in a lot of things and incredibly educated in most of those things. And he could have probably been successful in many, many other walks of life if he weren't a football coach. Like you just get, the very fact that he somehow created a whole pirate thing in the middle of West Texas is in and of itself crazy. And I know it sort of began with this, sometimes a pirate can beat a soldier, which, but that kind of was the first one that went national. But Scott,
he also said that the loudest stadium he ever coached in was War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock with 45,000 people in it. But the whole thing's concrete. It's like dropping a ball bearing in your neighbor's basement. It's fantastic.
I don't even understand what that means, but I love it. So I do want to get to the end of his career at Tech though, because it was Craig James's son, right? Like it was his son. Adam, who, look, I'm going to give the pro Mike Leach version of the story that he had sort of been diagnosed as having concussion systems and wasn't following the protocols. So to do some disciplining, and he put him in they like to describe it as a tool shed, but this isn't Arlington Stadium. This is actually really nice. It was temperature controlled and all that stuff. And did you want to add to the story before Scott gets to the opinion?
Well, Adam James shows up with wearing sunglasses to practice and saying he's still suffering the effects of his concussion, even though his own personal doctor had cleared him. He just didn't want to practice, which evidently was par for the course for Adam and Craig James at some point at SMU. So Leach, like a coach would do when he thinks you're dog late, just get off my field. Go to the shed. The shed turned out to be, like you said, an equipment room that had, according to this article, an ice maker, fan, ventilation, and exercise equipment. And then the story came out that, well, no, it wasn't a shed. It was an electrical closet under guard. The electrical closet turned out to be a spacious press room with video monitors, stationary bikes, and the guard turned out to be trainers who were checking on his head injury. This cost Mike Leach his job.
Because Craig James is a douche.
Is a giant douche. And anybody who spent any time around Texas football in the 80s and 90s and watched Craig James on TV understand that Craig James is a douche. That's not news.
Scott, your thoughts just on the end of Mike Leach and how that kind of I don't know. In many ways, for some people, it's like, well, we're going to get to Chris Beard in a second. Just the accusation was damage done to a lot of people.
Yeah, and Craig James is a douche. I just want to make sure we're clear on that, first of all.
We're unanimous.
Yeah, we all three agree on hating old SMU players. I think there's been a lot worse disciplinary measures taken against football players since Adam James was told to go sit in the equipment room. I think there's been a lot worse done to players. I guarantee you there was a lot worse done before that. I guarantee you that Craig James had worse done to him when he was in high school. Maybe even in college, probably not in college.
They probably took away one of the 5 cheerleaders that were servicing him. And what?
Right. And, borrowing one of Eric Dickerson's many cars that were given to him by various Texas universities. But I think that I think this is where, there's a song I think it's by the group Mod called Rich Kids Ruin Everything. And I think this is a case where a rich kid ruined everything. Adam James came from a life of privilege, obviously, because his dad, quite wealthy, and he didn't want to practice, and he wasn't much of that, but he's on scholarship. I can't get rid of the kid.
Mhm.
And, I'm going to tell you to go sit in the shed. And basically he sat in the shed, pouted, called dad, and dad was on ESPN at the time, and this became a big deal. So success breeds contempt. And when something like that comes out and you've been successful, here comes the big news article. If he was 2-10 at Texas Tech and this happened, probably not that big of a deal, but he was having success at Texas Tech. So this broke big.
It looks like we might have lost Scott.
Craig James stopped the broadcast.
Craig
He still has
James
that kind of power.
has killed Scott McIntyre. Yeah, we're back. Scott's back. Woo!
I'm
No,
sure
he's
you said
not.
something super poignant, but you froze for about 15 seconds.
About that. Yeah, there's a song about, and that's the case here. That's what I think happened with Adam James. And it was Mike Leach's first head coaching job at Texas Tech. People didn't know him then. Like, they learned more about him over the course of the next 15, 20 years. And that's how we saw things play out at Tech. But right now we're all remembering Mike Leach. And until we said Craig James's name, I don't think any of us have thought about him in quite a while.
Since he lost his senatorial run in Texas. So that was at least something. Or was it House of Representatives? I don't remember. Andy, let's talk a little legacy for a second. So I heard somewhere where he's like a few wins short to qualify for the College Football Hall of Fame, which I didn't even know they had such rigorous standards. One, should they make an exception in this particular case? I actually think they should. But also, two, how will we remember him going forward?
I think from just a on-field results kind of guy, he is a guy that took 3 moribund, and in the case of Mississippi State, worse than that, Washington State, and made them respectable. Texas Tech, again, I said it before, they are only in the national consciousness at all because of Mike Leach. They didn't do a whole lot before them. Border conference championships be damned, because that was a thing back in the 20s. Nobody had heard of Texas Tech, and nobody cared about Texas Tech. Mike Leach made them entertaining. Mike Leach put them in a position to beat what was then a good A&M program 9 out of 13 times. Mike Leach destroyed the national championship hopes of the Texas Longhorn team on national television. But he did.
How would we do this? Is that how it worked?
He went from there to Washington State, which is a program that nobody thinks about for anything. You can't even get to Pullman. I think you have to take a rail and then skis for the last 5 miles.
There's a gravel road. They finally got it built.
They got gravel because of Mike Leach.
Because of Mike Leach.
But that he got that program to the point where they won 11 games in a season. That's a huge deal for a team that most Pac-12 teams wrote down as an automatic win. If they have homecoming, that was the team they played.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Mississippi State, which taken over for Dan Mullen, who had been successful, but continued with a depleted roster because Mullen left the cupboard pretty bare and kept them at a level of respectability and in the national consciousness in the SEC. It's just, again, more of that. That's the legacy for me for Mike Leach. We talked about the coaching tree. We talked about the players. We talked about the system and the innovation. I don't see at some point how you keep him out of a Hall of Fame if that kind of thing matters. And that's, I think, the irony here is we care about this. I guarantee you Mike Leach would not give 2 shits about being in a college football Hall of Fame.
You're probably right. You're
He
probably
would like
right.
to be in the Key West Hall of Fame, and I'm sure he's already there.
Yeah, I'm sure he's already there. Scott, what about you, though? I mean, your thoughts on that Hall of Fame thing, if it matters, and just overall what his legacy will be?
Well, I think he deserves it. I do think he deserves it. The Washington, Andy's talking about Washington State. I want people to understand that the head coach before Leach was 9-40 at Washington State. Mike Leach was there for a total of 7 years, and turned that around and made them quite respectable. I think everything he's brought to the game and everything he's meant to the game, I think the case is made for him to be, for his legacy to live on, shall we say, the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't know. I had Coach Leach lived and coached another decade, I still think the resume is complete enough. Three conference coach of the year titles, including one national coach of the year title, offensive innovation, entertaining personality. What more do you want? I mean, really, what more do you want out of this guy? He was, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
he's going to be missed. He's definitely going to be missed.
And and I know, like, it's become what jaded people say when you express thoughts and prayers. But we definitely expressed our thoughts and prayers to the family. The number of text messages I got between Jessica and my brother-in-law and other Longhorn fans about how much they're going to miss the guy, I think was a real testament to his power. But now there's some other news, and I'm going to pass the show over to Andy to kind of fill us in about the other thing that happened to a former Texas Tech Red Raider coach.
And I don't like the visual of making the Aggie report on the Longhorn News, but we'll go ahead and do that anyway. So Chris Beard, head coach of the Texas Longhorn basketball team, the number 2 ranked Texas Longhorn basketball team, last time I checked, was arrested 4 days ago, in Travis County at 4:18 in the morning for a third-degree domestic assault, third-degree felony. Evidently, he choked his fiance, and they had been in a 6-year relationship, according to the affidavit. Thankfully, it was not what was initially reported, that he choked one of his daughters. That was part of the rumor mill that had come out, which is a whole different story. But according to the affidavit, Beard hit, choked, bit, and bruised the woman, and throwing him around, and went all nuts. That's actually in the document. All nuts is a technical legal term, which we probably can't talk about. Anyway, the school rightfully responded by suspending Beard indefinitely without pay and pending investigation. There's a bunch of rumors now that the fiance is going to decline to press charges. I think that's still in negotiation, and I hate to use that term, but that's kind of what it is, because it does, if they're about to be married or they're in a relationship, that does affect her personal income as well, unfortunately. And we live in a society where she has to make that kind of decision. But that's kind of where we are. Texas has a interim basketball coach by the name of Rodney Terry, and they beat Rice that same day that Chris Beard was arrested. So far, no harm, no foul to the basketball team. Big harm, big foul to the University of Texas and their image for employing somebody like Chris Beard. And kudos to them. And it's hard for me to say as a A&M grad, but I think that you have to handle these kind of things in the way that Texas handled it. It can't be something that you give a pass to. And we've seen a lot of schools that certainly would give passes to players in the same situation and to coaches in the same situation. But Texas took the high road and did the right thing by making it known that domestic violence isn't something they will tolerate from their employees. So there's still more to come, I think, pending whatever investigations are going to come. I don't expect that we're going to see Chris Beard back this season, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, look, I'll start because clearly, I have to. This is one of those opportunities that you get in life where you can capitulate on things you believe, or you can still believe them. And I don't know that I think that Chris Beard should coach at the University of Texas again. And I understand guilty and innocent are two different things, and you have to let the legal system play out. But there's also a standard of behavior that you need to expect from a school like the University of Texas. If you think about the political leanings of the school, the how we don't want to be Baylor, like all that stuff. And I just don't know that the school will want to deal with the black eye that comes back from if she decides just to all of a sudden not press charges. That's not the same thing as being found innocent. And what will that do to the school's reputation if he just comes back next year? I think the best thing for the program and for the school, and probably honestly for Chris Beard, is to just move on and figure out next steps. And I know that's more complicated, Scott, with buyouts and things like that. But although this might actually erase any buyout, you never know. But just that's kind of where I'm at, Scott.
Yeah, if this, so these are alleged allegations.
Absolutely. 100%.
I want to throw that out there. I want to throw that out there first. He is guilty until proven innocent.
There's so much space.
But we have ants. Expired.
Expired. Your ants are expired. I love that commercial though. Did you friend? I sent you a friend request. It's a great commercial. No, I think that whatever. I think it was strange that his attorney came out so strongly saying he is 100% innocent of these charges, and that it's inconceivable that he's being charged. The complainant wants him released immediately. I thought that type of statement so soon after the incident was strangely strong, if you will, because we have to. I want people to understand when a domestic situation occurs, most of them are misdemeanors. You know, you get charged with a misdemeanor for something. To be charged with a felony that carries the weight of 10 years in prison potentially with it. There has to be some serious evidence. Police were called at 12:15. He was booked in jail at 4:08. They spent 4 hours with the guy. So I don't know what was happening, but there's a lot of evidence, obviously, that police gathered for them to think that they could make a felony charge stick. And regardless of whether once a felony charge is in place, regardless of whether the complainant still wants to go forward with charges, it's not up to the complainant anymore. Yeah. It's up to the DA.
Well, that's a good point too, right? Like, I mean, it's not to interrupt, and you can obviously continue, but she might not have a say in how this stops.
That is correct. That is correct. And even more so, she could be treated as a hostile witness if she doesn't want to cooperate, but police have a mountain of evidence that they can call her back to, show pictures, take statements that were given at the time. If you have the evidence, even if the complainant's not cooperative, there's still the potentiality of a guilty verdict being rendered. I hope the truth comes out, whatever the truth may be. It does not look good for Coach Beard right now. I think that's obvious. I hope he, if this turns out to be true, then I agree with you, Jim. His tenure at the University of Texas is no longer needed. He can maybe, he coached at UNLV for what, 3 or 4 weeks before he left them to go to Texas Tech, and UNLV's just brought Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator. Maybe he can go hang out with him in Vegas. I don't know, but I don't think that I don't think things look good for Coach Beard. I feel really sorry. The people I feel the most sorry for are the players on the University of Texas basketball team. You're number 2 in the nation. You beat Rice in overtime by 6 on the day this happened. It's for people to think this didn't have an impact on that team, that's ludicrous. They would have ran Rice out of the gym otherwise if none of this had happened. So I feel sorry for the players. I hope they're able to rally around Rodney Terry, and I hope that they're able to continue with the good season that they started on.
Andy, did you want to follow up on that?
The whole thing's gross. The attorney, beyond just protesting, that he needs to have all charges dropped, seems to have taken the tack that the fiance was the aggressor in this, whatever happened, and that Beard shouldn't have been arrested in the first place. And again, it's kind of a comment on society that even gets entertained. But to Scott's point, the police don't, especially in Austin, right, wrong, or indifferent. If you are the head coach of one of the programs in the University of Texas in Austin, you're going to be given a certain amount of leeway on some things. shouldn't be domestic violence, but let's say that's a thing. They spent 4 hours there. They saw enough physical evidence on this woman's body to pursue a third-degree felony level charge. To Scott's point, that's not a misdemeanor. That's not something you wave away, and that's not something the police wanted to make go away. That's a mess for a coach. That's a mess for the university to have to deal with. I hope the truth comes out, but some things are irrefutable. I understand this is all alleged. I understand why we say the words we say, but if you have bruising all over a woman's body, if you have ligature marks or choke marks on somebody's neck, if they are bleeding, bloody, bruised, whatever it is, and the accused has nothing on them, there's very clearly something happened to lead to the charges and lead to the suspension. And, you know, I feel bad for the family. I feel bad for his daughters. I feel bad for the women. I feel bad for the kids on the University of Texas team. But I feel bad for us that this is going to be something we have to debate about whether or not Texas does the right thing. And I mean the state of Texas, Travis County, and then eventually how the university responds to it. Happy that the university responded the way they did initially, but I don't really enjoy the idea of what's likely to happen is the guy that's got a $24 million contract is going to be able to buy his way out of this.
Well, and I, you know, the one thing I would like to point out to people too is, obviously he's been accused. He's not been guilty of anything, but when it comes to me, the University of Texas, you still put yourself in that position, which is not good for the school. You and I and Scott have never been arrested for felonies it doesn't just happen. And so I think just, again, I'm going to reiterate that, I don't want a situation at UT where we have to hold our nose if he does come back next year and is successful. I don't know. That's all I got to say about that.
Well, let me throw a positive note on this. Okay. Domestic disturbances with coaches have been happening forever. You didn't hear about this 50 years ago, right? This didn't make the papers. Our coach,
right,
his girlfriend or his wife or whatever, that didn't make the papers. Probably didn't make the papers 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. It would have. So I do want to say that we as a society are at least taking this seriously. And this is newsworthy and noteworthy. And we have turned a corner, at least in calling out bad behaviors like this and expecting places of authority like the university to do something about it, especially if it turns out he doesn't have to be found guilty for this to be true. And I hope that the university is able to make that distinction. But I also do think that we've come, that we should say, we're getting better as a society, long way to go, but we're getting better in that we actually pay attention to these things and call them out and treat them seriously and don't treat it like, oh, coach is under a lot of stress and had a couple of drinks. No, call it out. And I'm glad to see that we've done that.
Especially if, happened at 4 a.m. So, Andy, do you have any final thoughts on it before we head out?
No, I think Scott said everything. It's an unfortunate situation all the way around. And I hope that we can stop calling Coach Beard really quickly.
Yeah. Like mom and daddy always told you, Jim, right? Nothing good happens after midnight.
I think about my wife. Nothing good happens on 6th Street after 1:30. All right, guys, that will wrap up Yell Fight Sooie. Thanks for jumping in. We will be back next week to continue talking bowl games and signing days and hopefully some more fun stuff that we can get out of the college football world. He is the fight. No, I'm the fight. He's the yell from the Fight in Texas Aggies, Andy Tom Chesson.
Yeah.
And the Sooie of Scott McIntyre. Thanks for jumping on, guys.
Woo pig.
Y'all Fight Sooie is part of the Let's Get To network. Y'all Fight Sooie is produced by Twitchy Dolphin Media.